Daniel Freitag, welcome to the Executive Talk.
Thanks for having me.
We meet in your factory, and it's big, it's very busy, and I was wondering when I walked through the assembly line as well, do you often have to pinch yourself and just think about, how it was maybe 25 years ago, where you started very small with your brother in your communal flat, where I heard you just brought the tarp home and you did the bags for yourself. It's a completely different game right now, right?
It is, but it's like with children. It's like a steady growth, so you don't realize it. Of course, now I sometimes realize the difference from the beginning, but overall, I have adapted to the situation we have now.
It is a huge business now, and you have employees, and things are going very well. Here again, the question: if you compare yourself to what you were or who you were 26 years ago when you started and founded the company, have you changed a lot?
I think I learned a lot. I think I'm still the same. That's my feeling. I don't have the feeling that I changed. I think I had the chance to learn a lot during a successful journey, and I think that's just I'm grateful for that. But I think I'm still the same.
Really?
Yeah, somehow. Probably I have the same struggles and I have the same feeling of success somehow. Yeah.
Also the same fears, because when you started, you didn't have a clue about where this was going, and now that you're successful, one might think, oh, now I don't have any worries anymore. But maybe the more you grow, the more the worries grow as well, no?
Maybe that's also a little bit like small children, small problems, big children,
exactly.
Bigger problems. It's a little bit the same, but at the same time, we have a team. We have a quite special organizational structure, and so I don't have the feeling I'm alone with those problems. I really have the team feeling, and I have the spirit that we have. We really like a family who is sharing the success as well as the struggles.
That is quite striking, and in every interview you talk about it. It's the company for you is almost like a family, and of course the core of it is the family. It's the two brothers. I heard that even your mother was kind of involved in the beginning as well.
Just very little.
Very little, but she was kind of she was helping you out as well. Now you call your employees also part of a kind of an extended family. Was that family spirit one of the reasons for your success? What do you think?
Probably. I think it's part of the culture, and the beautiful thing is it's not us calling that the family, it's what I heard. I think it's also a term that is used quite widely in our company, and so I think it's not something that we kind of project. I think it's really the culture that we have.
Of course, in a family, and we can talk about the kind of the core family later on, but if the employees are considering themselves almost like part of a family, it can make it more difficult for the boss to be the boss, and to be maybe hard sometimes, and who knows, maybe even fire someone. Do you feel you still have that freedom or that liberty?
I think we really have. I think we're over that point. I think we have a totally different perception of leadership. I think it's not the bossy kind of leadership. I never was, I never wanted to become, probably. And I think maybe it's because we have been from beginning on, we have been able to, it was always a teamwork, it was always shared responsibility, and somehow I think we always extended that to the whole team. And now especially I think we have leaders, we have leadership, but we don't have bosses.
That's quite interesting, and you talked about this as well, that you said when we started this, we never wanted to be businessmen, or we never really were interested in the management part of the thing. You are a designer, you want to create something, and you have kept that liberty in a way that you say, I still don't want to do human resources and be too much involved in the kind of financial thing. Of course you have to, but is that the liberty you still take out of the business, that you say at the heart of it, I'm not a manager?
Yeah, that's probably true. Especially not the image of the manager that I had. I never wanted to become. The interest in designing a company, that really grew, and I think that's probably the main difference. I was focused more on really creative stuff, work, designing products, graphics, concepts, so really more like the visual product designer type of person, and now I really enjoy designing the whole company.
Does that mean you have enough time for it as well? Because sometimes creative people, when they have their own businesses, kind of complain, about, oh, I still don't have enough time for this. Do you take that time, or do you think that the balance is just right, or is it almost like a constant struggle?
It's definitely a constant change. I think every year seems to be different in the last 26. So also what is needed from my side, sometimes you really focus on the products and try to be a creative director in the classical sense, and the next time you're more developing the organization, the structures, the strategies behind it. So I think the task changed quite a bit, but I think the way we work, I mean, now design thinking is a common term in business, and I think that's probably I'm quite happy as a designer to use with to work with the same toolbox or with this kind of skill set on all kinds of topics, and not just on products or graphics.
It's funny that you say that, because when I look at the history of Freitag, I have the impression that you were almost the first in many aspects, or in many kind of topics as well. Let's take the sustainability topic, for example. Something that you always say, we just do what we do. We don't have to have that tag or that kind of sustainability brand. But you were one of the first who were actually implementing that kind of almost like the circular economy theory, that you said we take something and we use it again instead of just throwing it away, right?
Yeah, we definitely have been pioneers in terms of sustainability, and I'm super happy that it's now a widely shared topic, because I think circular economy is team sports. You need to have a lot of partnerships, and it's always change and handovers, and so I think circular economy is not something that one player can do. It needs a whole network of people with the same mindset, of companies with the same mindset, and so I'm super happy that the world is moving in this direction. But of course we have been pioneers in that sense, and maybe also in others, especially for Swiss perspective, where usually it's about cleanness, perfection. So it's kind of the dirt or the beauty of imperfection is
it's
not
almost
so
un-Swiss,
Swiss,
right?
Yeah.
And speaking of sustainability and of these ideas, you have a new concept as well, where the customers can actually swap their bags, so they can change their bags for new ones. So people can meet on your website, and they can just simply swap and change their bags. Is that in that kind of thinking as well, that we don't want the customers to maybe having to buy a second or a third one if they don't like the old one again, but really kind of have that, again, that circular economy going?
Yeah, I think it's a very good example, the Freitag swap application that we have, because you could say like, okay, that's a bad business for us, so people swap their bags instead of buying a new one. But I think that's exactly why people trust us, because I think it's not about, okay, we could sell one more. I think people buy Freitag bags because they feel not locked in their product. So if you can, that's a great service. Okay, if I don't like my bag anymore, there are thousands of people out there, which there are already, even after just a few weeks that we started up, it's already thousands of bags which you could swap, and I think that's exactly why people trust and see that we are honest with our sustainable philosophy.
Is that part of the Freitag DNA in general? Because there are other examples, for example, that you don't want to have the bags on sale, for example, so you'd rather buy them back and do something with them, or that you don't advertise your products, so you don't kind of shout out too much about what you do. Is it just because you don't want to be a sellout? Is it you don't want to become too corporate, or is there a kind of a deeper meaning in there?
Well, there's definitely deeper meaning. I think we see the results of when consumption gets out of
hands.
And I think if you're really serious about those topics, then it doesn't end with a little bit sustainable material. That's important, that's the core. But around that, you have to create a whole circular economy, which doesn't end with the supply chain. You have to involve your customers.
Is it true that the whole idea started in the family Freitag as well, when your father showed you in the garden how something grows better on a kind of
the
on the soil?
Exactly.
Exactly.
I mean, it was more a hate job to bring the bio waste in the backyard. So my brother. But
that's
and myself,
where the idea kind of.
But I think we understood something. cucumbers grow bigger on the compost than next to it, and so that waste is nutrition for something else. It's a different perception of waste, and I think that's what we learned in our childhood.
Something that struck me, that was one example where you talked about, you were working in the garden together. There are other examples where you're always working with wood in the shed. Everything you did, it seems to me, as children, you did with your brother, who's 1 year apart. Having grown up with a brother myself, it's hard for me to imagine that were there never fights, were there never kind of arguments? You have been growing up until now, growing up together in a way.
But they're all the time.
Oh, they are,
they're arguments.
okay.
But I think it's, anyway, I mean, if you really have partnerships in businesses, I think it's always a challenge to establish them over a longer period of time. And I think it definitely helps that you know at least at Christmas you see each other again. I think in our case, it also helped that we had other team members then joining the team. So you change your language, you try to reduce your brother slang onto a level that other people can participate. But I think we have to renegotiate our relationship every year again.
Constantly, you do? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
somehow. Sometimes we really are very close and having similar responsibilities, doing more or less the same schedule all week long. And there's times in our company history where we had quite separate places in the company, and where I think we agree on what we think is good, we agree on why we are doing what we're doing. On the how, we have quite different ways how we would address a topic.
What did that mean for the tasks you were doing in the company itself? I mean, it wasn't defined then that it was just, you know, the one is doing, I don't know, the finances, the other is doing the creative part. It was always mixed, right? And which makes it more difficult as well.
Yeah, and often it was kind of a smooth and unclear shift. So somehow he got an idea, I picked it up, didn't get any further. He simplified it with a good input. Then I maybe was going deep and really try to maybe get the ground concept really to the bottom of it. So I think it was kind of a smooth handover in competence and how we our characters are. And I think now we have to declare it more precise so that other people, now we're over 200 in our company, and so they need to read us and see who is responsible for what. So we need to be more precise on our responsibilities.
Speaking of those other people and of the people who work for you, isn't it hard for them too sometimes? Because if you have one boss, then you want to please one. But if you have two, that makes you even more, it makes you even stronger. Do you think there's a risk that people might say, oh, if the brothers don't like it, why do it? Or if they like something we don't, we have to do it anyway. Is there kind of a constant risk of too much kind of, the brothers in the middle of everything?
I think externally maybe we are seen like that, but internally I think we have really a different system. I think we work with HOLACRACY, which means like you have really precise roles. I myself have maybe 12 roles, and so I think it's much easier. It's not just Daniel Freitag who says something. So I'm talking from the role of the creative director, or now I'm representing the company in an interview. That's a precise role, and people can address me in that role and can have expectations how I should act or what I should deliver in that role. And I think that's much easier now for everybody to kind of react on what I'm saying and really interact with me on eye level.
Mm-hmm. However, you said, or your brother said in an interview once, we are constantly thinking about the kind of post-Freitag time. What happens if we wouldn't be around? Mm-hmm. Do you think of these times where you might think, okay, what happens to the company, mm-hmm. which bears your name, mm-hmm. after you have been here? Mm-hmm.
I definitely, I'm really confident that we made a super important step the last 3 years. I really see that we have a culture, we have an operating system, we have processes which really don't really need me. Of course, maybe I have really good ideas, could be, but I think now the company doesn't need them. It would survive without me already now. I think I can die today. And I'm not worried for Freitag because I think there's a strong purpose, there's a strong culture, and I think that's the most beautiful thing that I can see, kind of that the company works without me. And still I see a lot of fields, a lot of potential, which I love to give inputs. But I think that the company would survive without us.
So obviously the company developed and the people developed with it. When we speak a little bit about the business model of Freitag, which started with bags and then with wallets and more or less all in the kind of bag area, you're doing clothes as well, so you have a clothing line as well. Is this a kind of a deliberate attempt or a kind of a deliberate decision to let's not put all the eggs in the same basket, let's be as kind of widespread as possible?
I think there's more than one reason why we do it. Of course, we see the potential in the brand. I think we are an honest, circular kind of brand, and the world, I think, needs more kind of offers which have the mentality and values that are important for us. And so we really see that the brand has a lot of potential. At the other hand, we have our business is based on a monomaterial. This recycling material that we use, the old truck tarpaulins that we put into bags. I think it still totally makes sense. The material makes good bags, good quality, a good design, so it totally works. But I think it's a sort of a risk to really have the whole business model based on a monomaterial. And I think that's why we have been interested in clothing. That's the biodegradable circle. Here we really have a different approach. It's all grown in Europe, produced in Europe, and it also can biodegrade in Europe one day.
Just take the button off and then
exactly.
everything
and
is
so
biodegradable.
I think this is for us a big learning curve, and also that we as a company learn to deal with diversification.
Speaking of that, you were once involved, not with Freitag, but in another project, you and your brother, in skim.com,
yeah, right.
Which produced a clothing line as well. And really the striking thing is that was 20 years ago, and you already played with the idea of having almost like a social network where the clothing line had numbers on it, and you could kind of exchange with other customers, other people who bought that. Thinking back of that, you were kind of ahead of Facebook and all the others.
Yeah.
Does that worry you sometimes, or does that bother you sometimes? That you could be a billionaire by now with that idea.
I always say somehow this venture was my MBA, and probably also invested about the same amount.
So you learned a lot, right?
I learned a lot. Yeah. And of course, I think if you have a startup, I think, of course, the idea is important, but probably the team and the timing is even more important than the idea. I think that it's probably even, if you would think like, of course, a good idea makes the difference, but I think it's probably a third in place. And in skim.com, timing was definitely wrong. We have been too early somehow. I remember we, in our basic concept, we had imagined a gadget which is a mobile phone with an integrated camera. I mean, nowadays everybody has one in their pockets, and back then, 20 years ago, we imagined it, and it just wasn't on the street. So so it was really too early for that kind of business idea.
So the Freitags could have been the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Steve Jobs of this world.
Yeah, but I mean that's probably the wrong thing. It's always easier to look back, and so maybe we should have been. Maybe it's just too early, and so maybe now would be good to do it again.
Speaking of which, when you look forward, where do you see the company in 10, 20 years? When you're still around, of course, you're still young, both of you. But where do you see the company going, or what are your kind of long-term projects?
I definitely see Freitag as a lifestyle brand, but not in this. It has a little bit a shady sense, this lifestyle, because at the moment everything which is lifestyle is often correlated to consumption and waste. But I think to really kind of promote a different lifestyle, sharing economy, really recycling, having modular concepts, repair instead of throwing away. I think there's so many aspects to how our lifestyles of our society needs to change, and I definitely imagine that Freitag could play an important role in that. I think we already do, not because of the amount of material we recycle, but I think because we have been pioneers and an example, and I think there's many startups out there which see Freitag a little bit like they look up to what we did 20 years ago, and I think we inspired many businesses or maybe entrepreneurs, and I think has probably the bigger impact than the amount of trucks that we cut down here.
And the products, I know you're proud that you still sell the product you produced in the beginning, the number one product, which by the way is in museums now in Zurich and in the MoMA as well. So will the products still be the same? I mean, in 20, 30 years, will we still wear those bags?
Probably not. I mean, it could be that, Freitag is somehow a classic, and I mean, that's not, you can't produce a classic. It's the market who does that for you. And so somehow we ended up in the Museum of Modern Art and became sort of a classic of a certain era. And I definitely hope that we can offer more than this one first idea, and I see that that there are so many possibilities still in the field of accessories, but I think also in the field of clothing, it's the same. I mean, the industry is just learning that it really has to change. I mean, the fashion industry is I think, the second most polluting industry worldwide. So definitely there we need examples like Freitag, and I hope that the industry will adapt and try to move in this direction. And I can imagine to try to be always on that forefront and be a pioneer and an example, but I think it's also worth that maybe we could grow bigger and make an offer which has an impact itself.
Of course it's still work, and you once said there's not enough time in my day, or not enough hours and not enough days in the week to be doing everything I still want to do. Having said that, do you ever imagine yourself not doing anything anymore, just like 70, 80, enjoying your family, and who knows, maybe be a little bit apart from your brother and live a different kind of life?
I mean, sometimes I definitely could imagine not being so much involved in the operative business. I think maybe more moving towards education, because I think Freitag is an example. I see that people listen and look to what we're doing, and I think maybe if I would invest more in this kind of educational level, maybe my personal impact would be even bigger. And I would love to also interact with a younger generation, because I think society makes such a big change at the moment, and to bring that as well, not just in terms of digitalization and AI and all this stuff, but maybe bring that also to a sustainable lifestyle. And if I could be there, have an important role in that, I think in the education of that, I would love to do that.
It sounds like you're a man with a mission in a way.
Well, I'm trying to understand that.
Daniel Freitag, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.